Alright, so this is these are some books I've collected over the years. It's quite interesting because you've got the original Situationist stuff, and then it sort of branches out in different directions. So I've done little piles, different branches of the tree, if you like. This is the original. It's not the original actually. It's just the famous brochure that was published in Strasbourg for the by the student council. 10,000 copies, and it caused a huge scandal, advocating the end of everything, and it's a forerunner of 68. This is the last publication, so this is a copy as well, it's not the original. The true session in the International, I think that's been republished since then. It was in 72, it was just Debord and his mate Sanguinetti. They did, and it's all about the problems in the Situationist International, the different factions, and the fact that the people weren't doing any work, and Debord was sick of them, and all that sort of stuff. This is quite a funny one. It's by these two guys, Raspaud and Voyer, and it's got all the protagonists, the chronology, the bibliography, with an index of the insulted names. This was published. So this is all the people who are in the Situationist International, with the section, nationality, whether they resigned or were excluded. So there's about 72 people who were members of the Situationist International over the years. And then you have all the people they talked about in the journal, and with the, for example, Marcelo Gentili, I don't know who that is, crétin, truqueur, every time they put how they insulted them. I guess one of the things the Situationists wanted to do is to be as clear as possible about who they liked, who they didn't like. And if they didn't like something, they would criticize, they would insult them. All this is published by this publisher, Champ Libre, who's run by this very rich movie producer called Gérard Lebovici. And he was producing all these very commercial movies in the 70s with Jean-Paul Belmondo, sort of like Charles Bronson type movies. But he was also doing this publishing house which published all these books that Debord recommended him, and they also published their correspondence, like, for example, there's Mustafa Kayati. Now, here are some books by Debord. Now, what happened to Lebovici is that he was assassinated in 1984, and he was found murdered in a parking lot. So Guy Debord wrote one of his first books, which was basically looking at what the press said about him and Lebovici and their relationship, and debunking all. And he made some other books like that later, which are sort of not that great. Like this one, that's another example. That's another book where he looks at all these articles that have been written about him. I think Lebovici was assassinated not because of the Situationists, but just because he was trying to move into the VHS market, and that's something that the organised crime has something to do with it. And I think that's why he was murdered. It's nothing to do with left politics. So this is a text that Debord wrote in the early 70s. I don't know if it's been translated yet. So now it's published by Gallimard. That's the first translation of the comments. This is the second tome of the panegyric. So this is something that's got a lot of pictures of the young Debord, of the city, of the projection of his first movie, this famous inscription, never work, all that sort of stuff. This is Ivan Stevlov, the guy who went mad. Just some places they lived. That's from one of his early movies. That's Michel Bernstein, Ascarjon, his mates. Ascarjon. So this is sort of like his last movie that he made. He put all these people's pictures. This is him in 68, during the May 68. Then Italy, where he lived in the 70s. You can see in his correspondence in the early 70s, it was a lot more about getting drunk and getting girls for him and his wife than about revolution. They were having a good time. They're getting famous, so they were sort of enjoying the fruits of fame a little bit in the 70s. Having a good time in Italy. That's his wife, Becca Ho. Where they lived, I guess, in Italy. So this is the house in the Auvergne where they live, where he talks about in panegyric. It's Spanish woman, I guess. And that's the final. That's the famous game he made, war game. And then finally, this is a picture because he said, people say I'm hiding, I'm some sort of secret guru. So in the book on Libovici, he published this photo just to dispel any rumours, that he was trying to hide himself. What they did, after Libovici was killed, they changed the name from Champs Libres to Édition Gérard Libovici. This is a catalogue. I actually went there in the late 80s, after his wife died. She took it over, and then his two sons took it over, and I went in there. I wanted to buy something, and I went in their shop, and these two guys looked at me like they looked like complete hooray Henry bourgeois types. They were sort of looking at all this stuff, so you can see what they used to publish in the early 70s, and I was too young, I didn't dare go in. I could have bought one of those war games and sorts of stuff, but they just looked at me like, who is this guy? So Debord would suggest books to Libovici, all sorts of books. This is sort of like his favourite authors from the 18th, 19th, 20th century. They published in the 70s, they republished, this is the first journal of the Lettrist International, which is Debord and Volman, Potlatch. There's an introduction by Debord. And it's quite funny, they have all these feuds with people, like they have these feuds with this guy, and this famous title, Apotheosis of a veal, talking about different things, architecture and games. Still the ideas were there, and commenting what's going on in the world. Now there's other people who come into this story now. In one of the best exchanges in this correspondence in the 70s is with a guy called Jaime Samprin, and he started a publishing company in the 80s called L'Encyclopédie des Nuisances. It was like a journal, and definitions like an encyclopedia, and all the definitions started with the letter A. And Debord is supposed to have written a couple. And this company, this publishing house, then published lots and lots of books like this, and you can see the same sort of style. This is about GMO agriculture. This is a great one about the collapse of the very big library, the Four Towers, which they define as an anti-library against people reading. As you can see, he got into some trouble, Jean-François Martos, on the banning of my correspondence with Guy Debord, because of course Alice Debord, the widow, she wanted to stop him from publishing his version of the correspondence. Now his versions of the correspondence is good because he's got his letters or other people's letters as well as Debord's letters, and he's also got some pictures which I think she particularly objected to because they show them on holidays in the south with Debord's wife, enjoying the sun, as you can see, topless. There's Debord, looking a very truculent figure, and this is topless wife. That's the guy's, Martos' wife. And I think she tried to stop the publication. He had done a sort of official history, which is just repeating what the journal already says. It's not very interesting. So all these people writing and breaking off and having sessions and stuff. Anyway, L'Encyclopédie des Nuisances, they went in a sort of anti-industrial direction. This is Jaime Samprin, the guy I was talking about. So, for example, they published in French the Unabomber Manifesto, Industrial Society in its Future, lots of different books. And in fact, it's interesting because this guy, René Riezel, who was one of the enragés, one of the situationists, he then joined them, and he was very involved in the anti-GMO. So this is the crime committed against the CIRAD, which is a sort of genetic engineering company. And he's published several books with them. And that's giving them even more of a way of people think now they've really taken on the situationist mantle, because these different situationists have gone with them. This guy and another one called Sebastiani. That was the first thing they published, I think. So this is about the Great Strikes of '95. This is against speed. This is about after the bibliothèque has collapsed, so about neo-technology. It's about the destruction of Belleville. This is to the British situationists. There's some text that they wrote, I can't remember when, recently I think, about the recuperation of situationists. This is a guy who was a member of Socialisme ou Barbarie. He met Debord in the early 60s and he wrote a book about the experience. This Edition Alia, he's been publishing a lot of stuff about the situationists. including this book, Interviews with Ralph Rumney, this book, Interviews with Jean-Michel Mention, who was one of the lettrists in the 50s. This is a reproduction of the book he did with Asker John. This is the Comité Invisible. All these, Michel Bounon, he's a French guy who's sort of in that same space. Olivier Assayas, the filmmaker, who's very influenced by Debord and really loved his stuff. And finally, some more anti-industrial stuff from, I think this is translated from Spain, the Friends of Ludd, Ned Ludd, Luddites. So the anti-industrial is sort of the continuation of in France anyway, that's the real continuation of the Situationists.